Day Israel, allow me to ask you a couple of questions if I may. Remember we just found out our perfidious pursuers were already in America before our ancestors arrived? You remember when the scripture said, quote, her young children are gone into captivity before the face of the oppressor. Right. And remember the video before that when we discovered our perfidious pursuers said, I'm paraphrasing, these are the children of Israel, instead of saying something like, these be the children of Israel. Right. And remember our Big Black Cult series when we had two options to choose from? You remember we had the option to believe all white women in Virginia got addicted to the pleasure and pain the wingding inflicted and bypassed going up north to where she could enjoy her black lover unaccosted, but instead they traveled through the slavery South to eventually become the future leaders of the so-called African American community. We had that choice, or, since we are looking at all things through the scripture, we can look at the exact same historical data and deduce this was the plan of our perfidious enemies to become our leaders unaware to begin with. Right. I beseech thee for one last question, gentle strangers. Remember our mulatto discovery series? You remember when we discovered the mulattoes in the islands, etc., were highly educated through their white daddies, hence why they were the ones who became our leaders. They only married each other, and they not only owned more slaves than most white farmers, but we even found out the mulatto nation was so rich they bankrolled most of the white farmers as well. Right. I can't hear your answers because this is a video. But if you remember all of those discoveries, check this out. According to Wikipedia under Cassare, listen closely, quote, casar, from Portuguese casar, meaning to marry, was the term applied to the marriage alliances set up between European and African slave traders. Stop. Bingo. So as you can clearly and plainly hear, for them to say, quote, was the term applied to the marriage alliances set up between European and African slave traders, that can only mean all of the mixed race couples were the result of marriage alliances between black, white, Jews, Arabs, and the Psalms 83 gang slave traders, and not, let me repeat, not marriages of love with so-called African Americans. These were all of our perfidious enemies setting up shop together before we arrived. I know this is the correct understanding because of what they say next. Quote, Cassara created political and economic bonds. It was a pre-European practice used to integrate the other, and that's what they got in quotations, to integrate the other from a differing African tribe. Listen to this. Just after they said African tribe, listen to what they say. Powerful West African groups, with an S, notice they didn't say tribes, powerful West African groups use these marriages as an alliance used to strengthen their trade networks with European men by marrying off African women from families with ties to the slave trade. Stop. I told you. As you know, there were two sets of traders. One set that was stationed in Africa that we will expose next to gather up the supply, and the other set here in the Americas to quench the demand. But again, notice they said, quote, powerful West African groups with an S versus saying African tribes when they just said African tribes. And that can only mean our enemies were working together just like the Psalms 83 pledge attest. But let's continue for more clues, shall we? Listen closely. Quote, early on in the Atlantic slave trade, these marriages were common. Say it again. Early on, the period that we're looking for, early on in the Atlantic slave trade, these marriages were common. The marriages were even performed using African customs, which Europeans did not object to, seeing how important the connections were. Yeah, I know. Listen up, listen up. African wives could receive money and schooling for the children they bore by European men. Wives could also inherit slaves and property from their husbands when they returned to Europe or died. Many coastal ethnic groups in Africa, such as the Ga and the Fenty, that's Ghana, and I forgot what the other one is. Sorry, I'm not unprepared for the other one, but the first one is Ghana. Yeah, the same people that y'all talking about us. Use this system to gain political and economic advantages. It enabled Africans to trust strangers with an S like the Europeans when dealing within their trade networks. We've already dealt with their trade networks. That was totally different. It made the transition between stranger and trade partner a lot smoother. Example. Bingo! This is the real reason the black elite don't give a damn about so-called African Americans. They are not us. But wait!